On August 13, 2018, in Frederick, Colorado, what began as a routine welfare check quickly turned into one of the most disturbing family homicide cases in modern American history. That same afternoon, Chris Watts stood in front of cameras, asking for his missing wife and daughters to come home. He appeared calm, controlled, almost detached. But within days, that image collapsed because Chris Watts was not searching for his family. He had already killed them. The victims were Shanann Watts, who was approximately 15 weeks pregnant, and their two daughters, 4-year-old Bella and 3-year-old Celeste. This is a full, evidence-based reconstruction of what happened, including the timeline, the investigation, and the interrogation, without speculation. From the outside, the Watts family appeared ideal. They lived in a quiet suburban neighborhood in Frederick, Colorado. Shanann maintained an active presence on social media, frequently sharing moments from their daily life. The videos showed affection, routine, and a structured family environment. But behind that image, there were underlying problems. Evidence later revealed that the family had gone through bankruptcy in 2015. There was significant debt, ongoing financial pressure, and increasing strain in the relationship. Communication between Chris and Shanann had started to break down, and emotional distance was growing. This contrast is critical because this was not a sudden collapse. It was a hidden deterioration over time. During mid-2018, Chris Watts began a relationship with a co-worker, Nicole Kessinger. The relationship escalated quickly between July and August. Chris told her he was in the process of separating, although that claim is not confirmed to have been true at that time. He searched online for apartments, vacations, and a different lifestyle. The affair is considered a major contributing factor in the case, but it is not confirmed as the sole motive. In the weeks leading up to August 13, several changes became noticeable. Communication between Chris and Shanann decreased. Chris appeared emotionally detached, and financial pressure remained constant. At the same time, he was exploring the idea of a different life. There was no confirmed history of violence before this point. At approximately 1:48 a.m. on August 13, Shanann returned home from a business trip. This is confirmed by doorbell camera footage. Shortly after, an argument took place inside the house. The exact details of that argument are not confirmed. Chris later confessed that he strangled Shanann in their bedroom. It is important to clarify that his initial claim that Shanann had harmed the children was false. That version of events was later identified as a fabricated confession. After Shanann's death, the children were still alive. Chris placed them in his truck and began driving toward a worksite operated by Anadarko Petroleum. GPS data from the truck confirms that the route was direct. Inside the vehicle, the children were present. According to later statements, Bella was aware that something was wrong. When Chris arrived at the oil site, both children were killed. The cause was suffocation. These details are based on his later confession and are consistent with investigative findings. The disposal of the bodies took place at that same location. Shanann was buried in a shallow grave. Bella and Celeste were placed in separate oil tanks. The openings of those tanks were extremely narrow, approximately 8 inches wide. This required time, physical effort, and deliberate action. It remains one of the most disturbing aspects of the case. After disposing of the bodies, Chris returned home and attempted to continue his routine. He communicated with co-workers and behaved in a way that appeared normal. There were no immediate signs of panic. At approximately 12:10 p.m., Shanann missed a scheduled medical appointment. Her friend, Nicole Atkinson, became concerned. This moment is critical because instead of waiting, she acted immediately. At around 1:40 p.m., police arrived at the house for a welfare check. Body cam footage shows that there was no forced entry. Shanann's car was still in the garage. Her phone and her purse were inside the house. There was no indication that she had left voluntarily. At this point, suspicion began to increase. A neighbor later provided surveillance footage The footage showed Chris backing his truck into the driveway early that morning and loading items into it. Chris gave an explanation for his behavior, but that explanation did not fully align with what was visible on the footage. This became a key turning point in the investigation. Chris later appeared on local news, asking for his family to return. Observers noted that his tone was controlled, and his emotional response appeared limited. It is important to state clearly, body language is not evidence, but it influenced how both investigators and the public perceived the situation. On August 15, Chris agreed to take a polygraph test. The test was conducted in a controlled environment with direct questioning. He failed. Polygraphs are not legally definitive, but they are used as investigative tools. After the test, Chris provided an initial confession. In that version, he claimed that Shanann had killed the children and that he reacted. This version was not supported by evidence and was later withdrawn. Investigators continued applying pressure. They focused on inconsistencies in his timeline, contradictions in his statements, and behavioral indicators. At that point, Chris began to break. He was arrested on August 15th. The following day, on August 16th, the bodies were recovered from the oil site. This confirmed the disposal method, the location, and the timeline. In a later interview with the FBI in 2019, Chris Watts admitted that he killed Shanann and both of his children. He also confirmed that the children were alive during the drive to the oil site. He suggested elements of premeditation. However, the exact planning timeline is based on his own statements and is not independently confirmed in full. The case was supported by multiple forms of evidence: GPS tracking, phone records, work logs, surveillance footage, and inconsistencies in his statements, all contributed to a consistent investigative narrative. The motive in this case is not singularly confirmed. However, several contributing factors are strongly indicated. These include the extramarital relationship, a desire for a new life, financial pressure, and emotional detachment. No single factor fully explains the crime. On November 6, 2018, Chris Watts entered a guilty plea. On November 19, he was sentenced. He received 5 life sentences without the possibility of parole and avoided the death penalty through a plea agreement. This case highlights several key investigative elements: rapid civilian response, digital tracking, timeline reconstruction, and behavioral inconsistencies. All played a role in solving the case quickly. Without early intervention, the timeline may have been significantly delayed. This was not a random act of violence. There was no prior criminal history and no obvious external warning signs, but internal pressure, emotional detachment, and opportunity combined to create a catastrophic outcome. Chris Watts did not match a typical violent profile, but the result was extreme. A family was destroyed, and the truth was uncovered through evidence, timeline reconstruction, and interrogation. This case remains one of the clearest examples of how an ordinary public image can conceal a deeply unstable reality.